Folks, Chris McLean back with another episode of the show. And in the studio today, I've got Scott from Reef Digital, and they're a digital marketing agency who help marketing managers at medium to large organizations drive growth and improve the performance of the campaigns through their conversion journey marketing service. They operate across paid and organic channels such as Google and Microsoft Ads, social media advertising, SEO, content marketing, messaging, and direct response copywriting. Scott, thanks so much for dropping by. Sounds like there's not much that you don't do.
Hey Chris, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, there's actually quite a bit that we don't do. So we're like I guess what people refer to as a performance agency. So we don't really get involved with like brand storytelling and things like that, or like video production and stuff. We do create, we do have capabilities for ad creative, but yeah, we're more on the direct response side of things. But in the same vein, we do cover the full customer journey, from awareness all the way through to conversion, and we do email as well. So that from the point of generating that first touch point with the target audience and then nurturing them all the way through to the point of conversion, that's kind of where we sit and use the most appropriate channels to do it.
Yeah, awesome. So what got you started with, I guess, that aspect, that sort of more direct response all the way through? What got you started with that? Did you come out of agency, or was this something you sort of decided to start one day? How did sort of Reef get started?
So I didn't actually start Reef. I joined Reef in 2015. Prior to that, I was with an agency in the UK for 5 years, and then 3 years prior to that, I was sort of building and launching my own websites and teaching myself the craft, if you like. But moving to Australia has always been a lifelong dream, and I was at the time in the UK, and after being with the agency for 5 years, an opportunity presented itself to come to Australia. So yeah, I kind of grabbed it with both hands, and I've been with Reef ever since, for the past coming up 7 years this month, actually.
Okay, so did you start in the role that you're in now, or did you sort of move up through the business into the role, the ownership role?
I've started with Reef in the role that I'm in now, but when I first got into digital, I was on the tools, started at the bottom, and kind of got experience of lucky enough to sort of operate in all the different channels. Really, I spent quite a bit of time in SEO and organic and content, and then spent quite a bit of time in paid social and Google Ads. So yeah, I've got quite a spectrum, and I guess that supported me in then progressing from that to elevate into more sort of strategy, and then eventually kind of running the business with the founders, with the directors.
Yeah, cool. How did you find that transition? Because that's always super interesting for somebody that sort of starts on the tools and then either founds an agency or joins an agency in a more management leadership role, and now you've got this whole other skill set of management and leadership and business principles and finance and all this other stuff that you're suddenly now responsible for. How did you sort of prepare for that, and did that come quite naturally, and how did you sort of evolve into that more sort of business leader role?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's probably a combination. By the time I'd kind of reached this point, I'd been running my own e-commerce business on the side as well for the past sort of 6-7 years. So some of the skills in sort of business operations and finance and that kind of stuff, I'd sort of taught from there. But other than that, it was kind of just a natural progression, really. One of the key milestone things that really help to develop some skills in this area is learning more about business operating systems. So people have probably heard of the books like Scaling Up and Traction and that kind of stuff. So learning those and then deploying those with the leadership team in the business, and rolling stuff out throughout the company, and in addition to learning more about like leading the team and stuff. That's probably one of the biggest sort of turning points in skills development, and then just continuous learning, really. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, to never stop learning and developing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a key trait of any leader, but particularly good leaders, that always willing to learn something else and sort of be a perpetual student of the art of whatever that next skill that you need to get right. And I like how you're talking about your journey, that you're sort of searching for that next skill and that next skill in you. Sounds like you're quite capable of going and finding a resource, absorbing some information, but then actually executing and practicing that thing until it becomes a skill set, rather than a lot of people can end up just in that education cycle of reading, watching YouTube videos, learning, and never actually executing that and deploying it so that it becomes something that they're capable of doing. Do you think that was quite natural for you? Is that just kind of how you always operated, or did you see that you needed to do that in order to thrive
So
in that role?
yeah, so in the initial, like in the early days, it's kind of because there's so
Mm.
much to learn with
Yeah.
digital marketing. It's like you're trying to drink from a fire hose. There's just so much information, and you've not really got the you've not really got enough knowledge to kind of join the dots. So you kind of
Yeah.
learn taking all these different pieces of the puzzle, if you like, and you're not quite sure where they all fit together. So at that point, you're sort of consuming. But like you say, Chris, what the key point is that you're executing as well. So I've always had, as well as being, no matter what role I've had in agency side, I've always had my own websites and business on like separately as well. So anything that I'm learning that might be a little bit too risky or experimental, that from a client to practice on like a client's site, I can do that kind of stuff on my own site. So a recommendation, I guess, to anyone is always have something of your own as well, outside of your agency life, so that you can sort of put skills into practice and always be learning too. And then as you sort of get more experienced and develop skills more, then you get to the point where, or at least in my experience, where like you say, you kind of know you know what area of skills development you need to kind of fill a gap. So then nowadays I'm a lot more selective as to what I need at the right time. But the learning never stops, so it's a continuous process.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. Is that sort of sandbox idea of having a side hustle, or a sort of a sandbox sort of thing over here that you can trial and test
Mm.
that stuff, where it's not going to break a client account or spend all their Google budget, or get you into too much trouble, other than your own money, perhaps. But you got it. It sounds like a really good way to learn, to have that sort of side thing where you can, if you're a Google Ads agency, you can run and test some new ad strategies, or test out iOS 14 and see how the new tracking works and that kind of thing, kind of in a safer space, perhaps. I think that's
Yeah,
a
exactly. And then
really interesting idea.
when you've got something, when you found something that works, you can then go to a client with confidence to say, "Oh, here's what I think we should do. Here's why." And
Mm,
I've tried this, and here was the sort of outcome. I think it can work really well for you. So you've got you can
mm,
speak with a lot more conviction and confidence, and minimize the risk for them. So yeah, 100% recommend that anyone
mm,
in marketing has like a sandbox as well to test stuff with.
mm. Yeah, I think you touched on a really important thing there, is having that confidence and conviction. Those are two big words, but two massive pieces for us as agency owners, as leaders, as people, as salespeople. We're trying to sell this stuff essentially and do this stuff for clients. When you're confident and you have that conviction of, look, I know this works. I've tested it. Here's the formula. Every time I do this, I put X in and I get Y result. So there's no reason you put 10X in, I'm going to get 10Y out the back. I'm super confident with that. Do you find that, like, because you have that conviction, it's much easier to essentially sell that, because you're coming from a place of, I know this works, I know I'm going to get you the result, rather than, I think, a lot of maybe sort of earlier agencies, or where you're trying to adopt new things. Perhaps you're trying to add on Facebook ads because you've heard everyone else is winning with it, but you don't really know how to do it, and you're kind of trying to sell it without having that conviction. I think those are two very different kind of selling ways to sell, really, or ways to sort of position yourself. Conviction versus not really sure about this. Did you
Yeah,
find that sort of follows through to that sales and marketing piece?
Yeah, it certainly can do. I mean, on the flip side of that, one of our core values is test and learn, actually. So on the flip side of that, we do like to work with clients who have that test and learn mindset too, because well, I guess as the name implies, that's where the learnings come from. But it's got to be approached the right way. It's not just like oh, let's try this cool thing because it's hot right now, and not
Yeah.
really have any kind of structure to it. Just kind of throw it out there and see what happens. It's like, okay, here's our hypothesis. We expect that if we add in this certain type of email sequence to anybody that's downloaded the lead magnet but not yet converted, we believe that doing it this way is going to increase conversion rates by 10%, for example. So that's what we expect to happen. And then it's like, how long are we going to run this experiment for? So how long do we think we need to run it for in order to get not necessarily statistical significance, because that's not always possible, but as close, as close to that as we can, where we can make a call and say, yes, this worked, this is what happened. It kind of confirmed or more or less confirmed our hypothesis. Let's keep it running. Or no, it didn't work. What did we learn from it? Here's why we think it didn't. And here, based on this, we're sort of closer to something that we think will work. And where do we go next with it? And what's our next hypothesis? And that's the sort of test and learn framework, I guess.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's super, super important for building campaigns and building client accounts. But for maybe again sort of newer people or agencies coming through that are kind of that can be a bit scary, like having that conversation with the client and kind of setting it up that way that, hey, we're going to run an experiment. Client goes, experiment, hang on, that sounds like you're going to burn my money or you don't know what you're doing. How do you approach that conversation of, obviously that's it's a process that's going to get them a result or learning that can be a bit how do you handle that, literally that conversation with the client to give them the confidence that this is going to give them some sort of a positive outcome, whether it works or not?
Everything's focused around what we call a critical number. So out of all the different metrics that you could track and that you do track at different stages throughout the customer journey, there's going to be one overarching metric that's the most important one to move. So that's and to improve. So that's kind of like your guiding light to everything that you do. And what we when we I'm going to come back onto the sort of where this test and learn fits in a moment. Say, okay, benchmark, here's where we are, and where is it that we're trying to get to? All right, so here's where we are, and here's sort of the goal to improve this metric, and then what's the gap between where we are now and where we need to be? Because if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always had. So it's not when we say experimenting and test and learn, it's not just sort of trying stuff for the sake of it. It's trying stuff with a purpose too, with the intention of moving this number and making the needle move. So it's okay, here's what we did say last quarter, and here's where we are as a result of that. So here's the gap. What do we need to do in order to close that gap? And I think we need to try this, and this. And if we do these things, this is what we expect to happen. So it's more rather than just experimenting for experiment's sake, it's testing and learning, but with a structure and to move us closer to the goal and close that gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it kind of puts it in that business context of here's a result that we're trying to get to, and as the experts, we believe from all of our our years of insights and understanding and how this stuff works, that doing these, moving these three levers is going to get us there. It puts it much more in a business context of here's the result, here's some pretty structured ideas, or like good hypothesis. Like it's a hypothesis, but it comes from like we know what we're doing, and we believe if we do these things, we're going to get some kind of a result, or at least this is what's needed to get you to close that gap in the business. Yeah, I think that puts some nice context around it.
Yeah, it's an informed hypothesis. So you're going to look at your data. You're going to look at like draw from your own experience as well, and then based on the data, the learnings that you've had so far, and your own experience, it's okay. Here's where I think we need to go. next? And so let's set this up.
Yeah. No, I like that informed hypothesis idea. And yeah, super important because in digital, that is how you grow businesses. You sort of have to move with the times. You have to shift. It's always kind of a shifting target. But if you can keep it, like I said, keep that eye on. Here's the thing we're trying to do. Here's the gap, and here's some measures we believe are going to get us there. I think that's a fairly risk-averse way to get there, right? There's a little bit of risk, but it's pretty risk-averse because you believe that those things are going to get, and most of the time you're more likely to be correct than not if you really know what you're doing, right?
As long as you're learning from it and making your next steps based on the learnings, because the channels might change. Well, channels do change. Platforms change, targeting changes, the access to data change, all that stuff changes. But what doesn't really change too much is the sort of funnel and the process that people go through. You've got to be active in the awareness piece. You've got to make sure you're reaching the right people with the right message, and regardless of what the most appropriate channels for those are. If you're not doing that, then no one's coming into your funnel. And then most people, I think that on the short end, if you're buying a pair of socks, your buyer journey might be very short, and you might move through those stages very quickly. But on the for say B2B SaaS type of products, the sales cycle might be quite long. So then you need a bit more of the nurturing piece as well as the awareness. So what are you doing from like retargeting and emails and that kind of thing to keep the person engaged throughout their sort of the average sort of buyer's cycle length that people go through before they actually convert, and how many times they need to be engaged and with what messaging, and then from the point of conversion, then are they having a good experience? So those kind of underlying fundamentals are sort of the same. If you've got a good idea of your buyer's journey length and you can match your nurturing to that, and you've got your awareness going, and then you make sure that the website's optimized for conversion as well, do those things well and keep refining those skills and optimizing the funnel. And channels and stuff can change, but those fundamentals seem to remain pretty constant.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what you refer to as your conversion journey marketing service. Is that something you sort of packaged up as this is sort of almost like a signature system type process of we have this conversion journey marketing service, and that's what you're talking about, understanding that entire journey, what parts of the funnel need to be more optimized than others, understanding where, as I said, like where's the drop off, or where are the in points, where are the out points, where are people dropping off, where do they need more help. Is that being something that's been developed around putting some process and structure around that idea?
Exactly, yeah. So when we first started off like years ago, kind of started off just in search initially, like Google Ads and SEO, and then as SEO sort of evolved from the more technical, like it was very sort of heavily technical back in the day, and then as it evolved more from that into more sort of brand focus, like where content marketing came into play quite a bit, and building up the sort of strength of the brand, we added content to our repertoire, to our SEO service, and digital PR services as well, to generate the right kinds of links and exposure to sort of round off the SEO service and keep it sort of safe and white hat. And then at the same time as the organic service was developing, sort of paid social was also kind of coming into play. So we added paid social to the mix, which was not just for direct response, because with paid social you can communicate with your target audience throughout that whole funnel that I described earlier, with the right message at the right time, and also promote the content that you were producing from the SEO. So it all kind of ties together. And then as sort of the industry kind of developed, more and more agencies started offering sort of like the same sort of channel mix and kind of services. So then it was, okay, how can we differentiate ourselves from like a commodity service based style of sort of positioning to something that kind of pulls all this stuff together into like, instead of looking at it in like a channel specific way, kind of zoom up a little bit and look at it in a more strategic manner where you can pull all this stuff together into a more holistic solution. And that's where conversion journey marketing originated from, where we get a lot more involved in the messaging that and the copywriting that and the messages people are shown at each stage, and then matching the nurturing to the buyer's journey and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was sort of our evolution, if you like.
Yeah. I love a good evolution story, and that ability to be strategic sort of often comes from kind of a long time spent kind of doing the work and doing the stuff down here, as you said, doing all of those pieces and going, hang on, there's a bigger piece here where we can, you know, restructure this and put that into, you said, more of an offer piece, where now, like, we're the only people that do this process. We're the only people that can do this kind of signature system, this offer that we're putting together. So I think that's very, very smart, and it gives you that something distinct and different to go and talk to prospects about. So yeah, super valuable too, if you can find that thing in your business of how can we take what we're doing and kind of shift it into something bigger, exciting, kind of more less commoditized and more of a sort of an offer base. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I think one of the, I guess, keys to like the evolution is just making sure that you kind of really listening to what your clients are telling you, and they're sort of, and not just clients but prospects, as new prospects as well, and sort of the evolution of, I guess, the problems and needs at the same time as you working on your own service, and then looking at sort of what's happening in the market, and actually just dedicating time each week to do that, to speak to people, new people and existing people, and blocking time out on your calendar to sort of just have a look around at the markets. Because if you just sort of living within your four walls, so to speak, you're a bit too in the weeds, and you won't be able to as easily spot the trends as if you're out there speaking to people and making dedicated time to have a look what's going on, and then trying to adapt your service accordingly to get in front of any kind of perceived trends that you see.
Yeah, love it. You've got to have feedback, right? And the best feedback comes from your customers and your prospects and people that are looking for the things that you provide. So yeah, I think that's a really good tip for the people out there that are trying to validate this stuff. We'll sort of work out what that next step is.
I go one further and say it's not it's a feedback system as well, rather than just making a point of collecting feedback. You probably have to systematize it, as with pretty much most stuff really in business. But okay, if we're going to get feedback, let's actually make this into a process so that it happens on a regular basis, and there's people accountable for providing it, and what we do with that feedback, and how that informs product development and that kind of stuff. So that would be I guess something that I'd like to add to that.
Yeah, love it. The more you can systemize that stuff, if you systemize it, it gets done more often than not, right? So if you put some sort of structure and system to, at least that stuff's getting done more regularly than if you just leave it up to, I'll remember to do that. You forget for 6 months, and then it's a bit sporadic. So
it gets done and it scales as well, because then as it grows, and you might not be the business might grow to a point where what used to be your job, you've got other critical tasks that need your attention. So if you've got it systematized, you can train somebody else to follow the system, and then you can delegate and elevate to your next development thing then.
Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, absolutely. Systemizing and being able to delegate and take the work out as you move up. I think that's another key thing of being a leader in an agency. And so going to go, what do I actually need to be doing on a daily basis, and what's all the stuff that is no longer best for me to be doing? And let's delegate that and get some other people in. And yeah, as I said, the only way to do that is to have it systematized and have SOPs and structure around that, so you can pass it on. So many points. I'm sure we could probably talk for the next 45 minutes and pick your brain even further. But in the interest of wrapping up, super appreciate you dropping by. There's been a lot of really, really, really good details and tips and strategies for folks sort of at all parts of that process, whether they're looking to how do we create something that's a bit more differentiated in the market, to how do I shift into more of a management leadership type position? What do I need to do? What do I need to learn? What's that next piece that I need to get my brain around in order to do my job better, all the way through to delegation and systemization? Covered a lot of stuff today, so appreciate you dropping by and sharing all of that knowledge. If people do want to reach out and get connected with you, Scott, where are some of the best places for them to do that?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram profile, but I'm not very active on it, to be honest. But yeah, if you want to follow me or connect on LinkedIn, that'd be great. Yeah, always keen to connect with others in the industry.
Fantastic. I'll drop those links in the show notes as always. Scott, thank you, mate. Thanks for dropping by. So we could probably just keep chatting for another hour or so. Really insightful. You've obviously got a good heritage and history of doing this stuff, and you're sounds like you're a really good practitioner at doing the right things in your business to create growth. And yeah, appreciate you dropping all of the insights and sharing your knowledge with us on the show today.
Cheers, Chris. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for swinging by. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.